What's the worst thing you found on a dead person's computer? When my grandfather passed away, I was asked to go through his computer and save anything valuable. There were heaps of letters and photos dedicated to all his children and grandchildren. I even found a speech he would say at my 21st. I'm only 18. I wasn't on the computer but my PlayStation. A friend of mine who passed from a brain tumor is still on my friends list. Around the time Sony was hacked by Anonymous, his account came online. It really freaked me out. I had a dead man's computer brought in for clean and repaired by his granddaughter as she was going to be using it now he had passed on. In the DVD drive was a porn movie. I can't remember the title, but it was outrageous like cum duzzling sluts sixth. Well, maybe not that outrageous. However, after repairing the computer I kept the DVD in the shop. You know, to protect Gramps' dignity etc. Good friend of mine had a major stroke and went into a coma. Prognosis was not good and the family made plans. Since I was the one that knew about computers, they asked me to go through his stuff and find pictures for his memorial service. To laptops and 10 USB sticks later. I wanted to bleach out my eyes. My friend was a great guy, but he was morbidly obese. Apparently he had been renting out escorts and such from online forums. They were far from pretty, and thankfully my friend only appeared in a few pictures, but had his clothes on. Out of about 10 GB worth of images I was able to find 5 suitable for his memorial service. The toughest part was telling his family that I could only salvage 5 photos. I told them the hard drives were corrupted. Yep, I wiped them. No sense in letting them know what I found. On a positive note, I did adopt his parrot. Until this day she keeps calling me by his name. My father died a few years ago from colon cancer. Even though I was only 19, my brother was significantly younger when we lost him. He was 7. My father and brother would watch a movie usually every other night, and a few months ago I finally got around to cleaning up his computer. I looked through his folder where he downloaded movies to, and the last film he downloaded was Spirited Away, and it was the night before he passed away. Needless to say, we watched it together that night. Turns out my brother was writing a novel and a ton of poetry. I always wonder if we should do something with it. I'm not sure how completed it all is, but my cousin who went through it said it was quite a bit of material. Edit. I'll seriously look into doing something with this now. I'm not sure if I'll be back in the US until this late summer, but I'll see if my cousin can upload the files somewhere next time she's at my parents' house. There are also piles and piles of notebooks and journals. Again I'm assuming are his poetry and short story collections. He told me that's what he was writing in the notebooks. Those would take a while to go through, since it is all handwritten. At any rate, he was a bit of a recluse for about 8 years prior to his death. He also had some severe substance abuse problems and an anxiety disorder, so the content/background for his work might be interesting if it gives insight on what was going on during that time. My mom said something that he was looking at publishers at one point, so it is probably what he would have wanted for some of his works. Oh, good. This story. So my uncle took shitloads of pictures, just all the damn time. We didn't actually realize the scale of this until I had to look through them all after he died. Turns out we cold lost every single picture ever taken of me, my sister, my cousins, and still we'd have a remarkably smooth transition from infant to adult in picture form. That said, we also discovered he liked porn. So much porn. And since we didn't want to accidentally throw away some priceless picture, I had to go through 3 hard drives and a couple hundred USBs and CDs of almost entirely porn. Now I was more impressed with his capacity to find and organize things than anything else. 4 GB of named, time-stamped videos and pictures of trans women with freakishly large breast implants urinating on men. We have the USB for that right this way. When I was 18 I took my older brother's computer after he died in a car crash. He was the sort of guy that people loved to be around, always laughing, joking. He made people feel good about themselves. His car had run into a grouping of those cement jersey barriers on a road under construction. No other cars were involved, and there were no signs that he had hit the brakes. He must have dozed off. While emptying his room in his house we found a set of crumpled papers. They were the unfinished first sentences of suicide notes. but he never left a completed note and instead chose to throw these drafts away. Maybe he sat down to write a note, decided he didn't want to die, needed some air, went for a drive, got into an accident? I couldn't understand how this happy great guy that I loved could be so unhappy. So I searched his computer for any clues. I was prepared to look in every corner for a clue, an internet history, a name log. This was back in the day, a photo, an email, anything. There was nothing. Not just nothing strange, nothing at all. He had already wiped his computer clean, probably anticipating that his little brother would inherit his computer and snoop around. It still doesn't confirm or deny anything for me. I feel certain that he intended to kill himself. But I've never been more upset to find absolutely nothing. Was tasked by a friend of a parent to wipe a computer that belonged to his son who committed suicide. I could have just wiped it, but a morbid curiosity and a feeling I was erasing the last of this person drove me to first delve into the files. What I found was essentially a diary of the son's last days, including his very last, which had been typed just minutes before he ended his life. There was something profound in reading those notes, knowing I'm the only one who will ever know his last thoughts. I don't really regret or wish I hadn't seen what I did. The last time I shared this experience I was made to feel guilty for invading the dead son's privacy. I still feel a little guilty for that, but I'm still glad I did so. The kid needed someone to listen to him, and well, even though it was too late, someone did. It's just a shame it couldn't have been earlier. My boyfriend passed away in December. I put his PlayStation on and play with a little FIFA character we made look like him. I know he would be laughing at how bad I was trying to score. I also saw his old phone. There was a message from a girl basically asking to go on a date, but he had texted her back saying he was actually in a new relationship, me, and it made me feel quite good. I trusted him completely anyway. I miss him every second. My boss passed away in his sleep just over a year ago. He was young, and it was unexpected. I helped his boss get into his computer at work, and also his laptop from home to retrieve insurance, banking, investment, etc. information for my boss's family. It was very eerie, in that I found my boss had a lot of the same tastes in music, TV shows, movies, etc. that I had, visited the same websites, etc. I felt like he and I could have become much better friends if there'd been more time. I ended up getting almost everything for them. There were a couple of Excel files with financials that were password protected. I ran some brute force programs against them for a few weeks, but eventually my boss had me shut it down, and then it was over. And so now I sit at his desk, on his computer, using his mouse and his keyboard, and do his job. I like to think he's out there, somewhere, watching over me, and that he'd be happy with what I've done in the last year. I hope so, at any rate. I dated a guy a few years ago whose father committed suicide. He was a principal at the same elementary school where my mom worked, and he had always made quite clear that he didn't think I was good enough for his son and didn't want us dating. After his death, someone went in to clear the computer of anything the new principal wouldn't need and let my mom know that there were files containing information about me on the computer, my transcripts from grade school through high school, any extracurricular events I took part in. It was a little weird. My boyfriend's beloved uncle died suddenly while staying in a long-term hotel. We went to clear out his things, and I got a hold of his phone. The death was somewhat of a mystery, but there was no ongoing investigation. I snooped through his phone to see if there were any texts or emails or indication of when exactly or how he died. His browser history was chock full of hits on a gay hookup website, and he had likely met up with a guy on the night he died. No one in the family knew he was gay, least of all his incredibly homophobic redneck son. I'm pretty sure my boyfriend cleared the browser history and emails and kept it a secret. Going through my grandfather's paper files with my father after he died, I found a stash of letters he and my grandmother had written to each other while my grandfather had been out of the country. I glanced at them and told my dad what I'd found. He came over and took one look at them, said "Oh my god," and grabbed them from me. In the second before he took them and threw them away, I looked back at the first page. It had been written by my grandfather, and it was definitely a love letter, but the name was not my grandmother's. After my dad died, we found a bunch of pictures of a kid who looked a lot like my younger brother. After some digging around, we found out my dad had an affair with some married lady about 12 years prior. She got pregnant and the boy is being raised by her husband as their son. My understanding of the situation is that the boy has no idea about my dad. My brothers and I discussed whether or not we were going to tell him, and we decided it was best to let the kid be raised by his parents without him knowing. Co-worker came up to me and asked if I knew how to get into a locked computer. Showed me a computer and said that the owner killed himself and his parents would like to get into it. About 2 hours later I figured out how to hack into it and change the password without logging in. Veil access to his computer. Right away I saw the face of the kid who had taken his life. A picture of himself was the background. After cranking away at this computer forever, I figured why not look through the files. I didn't know the kid or his parents, and it wouldn't hurt anyone to look. I looked through his files and found pictures of his girlfriend. I couldn't help but have this strange déjà vu-like feeling. It was extremely surreal, almost as if he was actually looking at me, or as if I saw a part of my old self in this kid. I have been suicidal for years now, and I just thought, what if this was my computer that someone had to unlock? It doesn't sound like much of an internal catharsis, but it struck a chord in me. Sorry I didn't find any interesting files, but I did find a new viewpoint on life. Not a personal computer, but my local library has a set of computers in there, and people can get username/passwords and use the virtual desktops, given they have a library card. This old guy would use the computer a lot. I wasn't nosy, so I never looked in depth, but he was using a word processor, so I assumed he was typing letters or something similar. Anyway, I volunteered there over the summer, and I had to close out inactive library cards, or ones that hadn't paid dues. Basically this meant I was deleting accounts by logging onto their virtual desktops and cleaning them out. The old man showed up in the lineup. Turns out he died a few months before. I opened up his desktop and went to documents because curiosity got the better of me and I wanted to see if he had anything some relatives wanted or something. There was his life encompassed in 2 folders. Folder 1, novel. He was writing a memoir of his tales in World War II. Folder 2, Missy. Missy, from what I could collect, was his wife. In it were dozens, if not over 100 documents of love poems and letters to her. I backed them up on a USB and intended to return them to his wife. I'm sure she would want love letters. As it were, the wife was dead and he was buried next to her in the cemetery. I was sad because these were letters to his long dead wife. She had died in 2004. I gave the files to his son, who read them out loud at the old man's annual memorial mass as a eulogy and testimony to the love of his wife. When my grandfather passed away, we were going through his computer to save off important things. We mostly saved off genealogy information, but found one very strange item. My grandfather had written a book/thesis on how much he hated my grandmother. It was about 150 pages long, had a table of contents, and all sorts of hate-filled stories and anecdotes. My dad shared it with one of his brothers, and they waited about 5 years before showing it to my grandmother. I'm still not 100% certain that she ever needed to know about that book. One of my family members printed it out and mailed it to all of my aunts and uncles. My dad is one of 7. It was a huge drama fest for years. It seems to have died down lately though. A while back, my cousin committed suicide while his family was out of town. We had been pretty close growing up, so I flew across the country to spend a couple weeks helping his widow with their 2 kids, 4 and 1.5 years old. Found a bunch of audio files on his computer of him playing with his son, teaching him songs, ABCs, laughing and whatnot. I uploaded them to my Fire account to keep that small part of him in my life. It kind of wrecked me for a while and I couldn't listen to them again, just squirreled them away. Couple years later I went to retrieve them, only to find Fire basically defunct and the account gone. On that same trip, I had found out some things about his widow and their relationship that lead to my cousin's suicide and have not spoken to her since, so getting them from her is out of the question. It's been over 10 years and the sound of his voice on those files, so happy and joyful, still haunts me. I wish I still had them. All I have of him is sad memories. My uncle passed away when I was 13. At the time, my parents weren't too good with computers, so my cousin and I were tasked with booting up my late uncle's computer to see if there was anything valuable. First thing we discovered was that he had changed all the sound effects, Windows 98, to female sex moans. Turned out he had some important financial information and personal writing on there, but no one knew how to change the sound effects. Like and subscribe for more Reddit videos.